There is likely no figure more instantly recognisable from any culture's mythology than that woman who has a nest of snakes in place of her hair. A monster so grotesque that simply gazing upon her would spell the end for any who are unlucky enough to find themselves in her lair. Glancing upon this creature was said to turn men and women alike into stone in an instant. Her unique appearance, though, has led to her being the subject of almost every form of art imaginable, from ancient pottery, paintings, and poetry to television, cinema, and video games. But depending on which parts of history you're inclined to believe, this abomination was not born a villain. Rather, her life is a tragic tale in which she found herself a victim of not only one, but two cruel Olympian gods. I am, of course, talking about Medusa. Medusa was born of the primordial sea gods. Her mother, Quito, Greek goddess of sea monsters, and her father, Perseus, the sea god of dangers and the hidden deep. Medusa also had two siblings, her sisters, Steno and Euryale, and together the three of them would make up the Gorgons. The word Gorgon comes from an ancient Greek word meaning grim, fierce, and terrible, and that's exactly what they were. Steno and Euryale were born as immortal beings, but the trade-off was that they were laden with disgusting proportions and hair made of snakes. But they also had sets of tusks, wings, claws, and scales. But Medusa, on the other hand, was for some unknown reason born mortal, and in time, beautiful. Speaking of Medusa, her name means guardian or protector, but as to why, we'll get to that explanation later. Despite being born to two gods of the sea, when Medusa came of age, she decided to become a priestess of Athena. Athena was the goddess of a great many things, but she's primarily known for being the Olympian goddess of wisdom, which, by the end of the video, you might find to be more than a little ironic. But regardless, as I mentioned before, Medusa grew up to be a tremendously beautiful woman with luscious flowing brown hair, and it wasn't long before comparisons were being made to Athena's beauty, which angered the goddess greatly. Being as attractive as she was, Medusa garnered the attention of many potential male suitors, but she rejected them all. The reason being, Athena, along with Artemis and Hestia, was one of the three virgin goddesses, and it was demanded that all of her priestesses were to be forever celibate in her honour. Trouble arose though, when one day Medusa, whilst walking along the coast, attracted the wandering eye of Poseidon, Olympian god of the sea, storms, earthquakes, and horses for some reason. Poseidon, taking a page out of his elder brother Zeus's book, attempted to seduce Medusa, but his advances were rejected. After all, it didn't matter who came calling, god or not, she had made a lifelong commitment to Athena, and she had every intention of keeping it. But Poseidon wasn't known for his patience. In fact, much like the sea itself, he was well known for his violent nature, bad temper, and an overall disruptive nature. He didn't care that Medusa had rejected his advances. He was one of the 12 gods of Olympus, and she was just another mortal girl. Her feelings on the matter of consent were of no concern to him, and thus Poseidon raped Medusa. And to add insult to injury, he did so in the worst imaginable location for her, in the temple of Athena. One might have expected Athena to step in and save Medusa from the sea god's lust-fueled assault. After all, Medusa had devoted her life to the goddess of wisdom, and this was her sacred temple. There would be no other place where her power would be stronger, but she was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps Athena was busy, dealing with some other affair. After all, the gods were busy, or just maybe. The jealous Athena saw this as the perfect opportunity to put an end to those comparisons between Medusa's beauty and her own. Whatever the case may be, what followed next, we know for certain. Athena appeared before Medusa, outraged at the vile act which had defiled and desecrated her sacred temple. Did she punish Poseidon? No. Instead, the goddess of wisdom punished the victim. Athena cursed Medusa on the spot. The hair of which she had been so proud of transformed before her into a bed of snakes, and anyone who would look upon Medusa for the rest of her life would be turned to stone. The details on what happened next aren't very clear, but what we do know is that Medusa would flee the city and meet up with her other Gorgon siblings in the cave they resided in. The girl was raped, and then turned into a monster, driven to the edge of the world, and cursed to live a life of isolation, never able to love. There are many differing origins to the myth of Medusa, but one thing they all agree upon is the ending. Medusa would spend many years fighting for her life. Word had spread far and wide about the dangerously lethal Gorgon, and many a hunter seeking glory would perish in attempting to claim her head as a prize, until one day, someone succeeded. The story of Perseus' birth is a strange one, no doubt, but as births go in ancient Greece, it's only a little abnormal. In fact, before the story is over, I'll tell you of a far stranger one. There once lived a king by the name of Perseus, and Perseus had been told by the oracle of Delphi that one day his grandson would kill him. The oracle was said to be a mouthpiece of the gods and was famously never wrong, so despite not having a grandson, this still worried Perseus. He then did the most reasonable thing he could think of. He locked up his only daughter Danae in a bronze chamber underneath his palace so that nobody could ever go near her, and more importantly, impregnate her. Danae, though, much like Medusa, was a beautiful young woman, and she attracted the attention of the king of the gods himself. Zeus came to Danae's subterranean quarters in the form of a golden shower of rain and impregnated her, and she would name the child Perseus. Outraged but not wanting to outright murder the offspring of the king of the gods through fear of consequence, Perseus placed his daughter and grandchild inside a wooden box and threw it in the sea. In his mind, he had outwitted the gods and their prophet. But somehow, Danae and the young Perseus survived this watery ordeal and washed ashore on the island of Seriphos. It is thought that Zeus had asked Poseidon to calm the water so that his new child might survive and one day see adulthood. Perseus did reach adulthood. He grew into a strong and intelligent young man full of potential. But in Seriphos there ruled a malicious king by the name of Polydectes, and he had taken a fancy to Danae, who in turn did not return the favour. But as we've seen already in this story, the opinions of women to men in power hold little to no bearing. Polydectes told Perseus the only way he wouldn't marry his mother and set her free was if he brought him the head of the most dangerous creature in the land. You guessed it, the Gorgon, Medusa. What Polydectes had asked of Perseus was no small task. He was asking him to do something that had never been done before. Many had already come from Medusa's head, and many had lost their own lives in the process. Perseus, though, was the son of Zeus, and if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be him. He truly believed he could kill Medusa and save his mother. And luckily for him, he wouldn't have to do it alone. Zeus, being his father, sent two of his children down from Olympus to deliver gifts to Perseus at the start of his voyage. The first of which would be delivered by the messenger god himself, Hermes. To Perseus, he gave a pair of winged sandals, a sword strong enough to cut through the Gorgon's flesh, and a helm of invisibility that he had borrowed from Hades, the god of the underworld. Then came Athena. Deciding Medusa had not suffered enough, she was more than happy to aid Perseus in his quest to slay the Gorgon. She bestowed upon him two gifts. The first was a shield, polished so well that he may look upon the reflection of Medusa and not be petrified. And the second was a kibisis, a sack strong enough to carry Medusa's decapitated head were he to be successful. What followed could be described as somewhat anticlimactic, given all that had transpired leading to this moment, but Perseus found the cave in which the Gorgons resided, and they were sleeping. He walked backwards, silently, towards the lethal Medusa, using the reflection of the shield to look upon his target, and in one clean slice, he decapitated the once beautiful, fair-cheeked maiden. But amongst the blood and mess that inevitably comes with the decapitation, there was something else. Two something else's, actually. From Medusa's neck sprung forth two children born of her and Poseidon, Pegasus the winged horse and Chrysaor the giant. As strange as this sounds, it wasn't a unique birth by any means. In fact, Athena was born of Zeus in this exact same way when he had his head temporarily cut off to cure a nasty headache. The two remaining Gorgons awoke and of course chased after Perseus, but with the powers granted to him by the helm of invisibility and the winged sandals, he escaped with his life, and just as importantly, the head of Medusa. Whilst flying home, he realised the head of Medusa still held its terrible power, and he used it as a weapon to petrify a sea monster, saving a beautiful young woman named Andromeda in the process, and eventually the two would marry. He also used the head to turn Polydectes to stone, and thus freed his mother, before gifting the head to Athena, which she would then place onto her Aegis. Oh, and many years later at a sporting event, Perseus would throw a rogue discus which struck an old man in the head, killing him outright. The old man? His grandfather, King Acrisius, because unlike Perseus, the oracle never misses. At the end of the day, the story of Medusa is a classic Greek tragedy through and through, and there is no happy ending to her story. Like I mentioned before, Medusa means guardian in ancient Greek, but she fulfilled this role in death rather than in life. Medusa, throughout history, has been compared many times to the evil eye, an evil to ward off other evils. And this is what her head was for Perseus. This devoted priestess of Athena was abandoned by her own goddess in her time of need, raped by another, cursed by the former, and then hunted for the rest of her life, all for having the audacity to hold true to her morals, her principles, and her faith. In that cave with her Gorgon sisters, Medusa prayed every day that Poseidon would come back to her and undo her curse. But instead, she was murdered in her sleep. The story of Medusa is a harsh reminder to us all that life isn't always fair. Her story is so desperately tragic, not only because of all that befell her, but because in the end, she was just a means to an end in someone else's.